Yeah, I've had a pair of clients that have been looking in the kind of glebe, kind of in that area near Lansdowne for the better part of a year and a half. 4 different properties they've been super aggressive on and lost on all of them.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. And now, here are your hosts, Paul Stevenson and David Warren.
Hello and welcome back to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. My name is Paul Stevenson, joined by David Warren. We are level 2 mortgage agents based out of Ottawa. David is also the owner at Referral Mortgages. Want to give a quick shout out, as always, to our amazing sponsors, Guertin, Poirier, Avocates lawyers, Big Insurance in Westboro, CENTUM, and last but not least, Easy Neon Signs, easyneonsigns.ca. If you use the promo code TOREP, get 20% off each and every order. Few orders in last week, Dave, and we want to remind everyone, hit the link in the description. Every month, Easy Neon Signs is going to give away one free neon sign to one of our listeners. We've had a lot of people register already. There's no cost to do so. You just hit the link, throw your name in there, and you're automatically entered. We're going to do the draw at the end of October, so get your name in there. David, how's the week going? You're looking very blue over there. Very blue.
Let's go, Blue Jays.
Crushing. The Jays are hotter than the market right now.
Needing another one of these.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, game. You were at the game the other day, were you not?
I was at the game Sunday.
Yeah.
Game Sunday. Amazing game. Just absolutely crushing.
It's nice to finally see
Fantastic.
a Toronto professional sports team that can win playoff games. You know what I mean? As a Sens fan, I have to throw the jab in there.
You know what? I like the fact the Leafs can't win, anything. So we're good on that. But the Jays, happy to see it.
When was the last time they won the World Series?
93.
93. There you go.
We're
coming. We're back. This is the year.
Yeah. Hopefully we can close it out. The series out tonight. This is coming out on Wednesday morning. So hopefully when this comes out, I will be celebrating sweep.
Yeah.
But anyways,
We'll get the brooms out.
Yeah. I'm not going to not counting any chickens. The Yankees are still a good team, but anyways, this isn't a sports podcast.
Yeah, the Sportsnet podcast.
I'll digress.
Actually happening today also, this will have already happened when this comes out, but Prime Minister Mark Carney is actually meeting with President Trump today as well to talk about the tariffs and so on. So we'll see what comes of that. Probably will be some news by the time this comes out. But most importantly, Dave, we have stats. We have some stats for September, and I want to get into that just so everyone can see where the numbers are. This is always one of the things that people ask us most that listen to the show is like, where are the numbers? What's happening? Oh yeah, here we go. So here's a summary. Sales activity slowed seasonally. So 1,089 homes sold in September, down from 1,236 in August and 1,318 in July. So September was pretty slow. This 3-month easing trend is typical for the transition from spring's peak to late summer. Sales remain resilient, still 2.4% higher than September of 2024. Average sales price, $690,397, so that's slightly up from August, and about 0.3% year over year. Year-to-date average price, $699,910, so that's up 2.7% from 2024. The MLS Home Price Index, the HPI, that's a composite, 627,200, so that's up 1.1% year over year. Breakdown per property type. So single-family homes, up 1%, 697,200. Townhomes, 462,800. That's up 7.8%. And apartments, 408,200. So that's actually down almost 2%. So prices have stayed largely stable. So that's kind of suggests that there's a steady demand despite more listings being out. Talking about the listings, here we go. Active listings, 4,388. So that's a 20% increase year over year and 10% month over month. It's about 21.8% above the 5-year average. So lots of listings out right now. To be honest, we've been saying this, good time to be buying. Lots of opportunities out there, lots of options. New listings, 2,832. So that's a 19% increase year over year. 4 months of inventory right now, which is up from 3.2 in August. So that's indicating a more balanced market. And inventory levels now align more closely with long-term norms rather than the tight pandemic era market. How do you see these stats impacting your personal business, Dave, or your market, your agents? Like what are you hearing and what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just in my own business and talking to other realtors, September was slower. I felt it. They felt it. I know of a number of realtors that have a lot of listings, product not moving. And I think that kind of shows in those figures of of the sales activity, the number of sales versus and I'll say this, a little bit busier and so I'm curious though to see now with kind of that back to school and September, families are kind of prototypically sidetracked with getting kids back in school, that new routine, back to office more. And then we had that rate reduction by the Bank of Canada on prime. We've seen the bond market come down. We haven't seen fixed rates adjust as much. So I'm curious though for October whether the activity does pick up and become more of a busier fall market or not. And so, it's to be seen. We're now, a week into the month. I've certainly been seeing a flurry of renewals, but that's also because we talked about it in previous episodes. There's just so many people up for renewal, but but in the actual purchase market, I'm curious to see if that does pick up through October, and as we've kind of had that ripple effect now of people knowing that rates are down on the variable of bank prime, which gets people thinking and talking. Kids are back to school, that more stabilized, kind of routine. If they come, it picks up, but I haven't seen it yet. I know you mentioned before the show that at least the start of this week, even though we're only Tuesday, has been like you've been fielding a lot more calls than you were even in the past few weeks. But
yeah, it seems like this past weekend, like a lot of open houses, like even just driving around, a lot of open houses. And obviously the weather helps. It was 30 degrees this weekend, which is absurd for October. But a lot of open houses, a lot of people interested in properties are telling me like, hey, we're thinking about throwing an offer on this. Like, can you run the numbers on XYZ? So a lot of people still shopping. The interesting thing I saw in those stats too is that the days on market dropped in August from 28 days to 23 days, indicating that like when people are buying, they're rapid firing. Like people are closing quickly, or at least putting in offers and closing quickly. I've also seen that like the people that are looking to put in offers are oftentimes competing with others. So it's that same thing. Like I think there's still a lot of properties that are priced too high. We saw that month over month number on average home price dropped. So I think people are not adjusting accordingly to where the market is, and they're keeping that price high, which is making the properties sit a little longer. And I think the people that are aggressive on their offers or aggressive on their pricing, are seeing a lot more offers. And as I said, like the people that I see putting offers in are oftentimes having to like shave their conditions, shave their conditional period, and are competing with other people. So it seems like the properties that are very attractive are getting traction, are getting offers, and that days on market would indicate that, as we saw in September. So down 5 days. I mean, it's almost 20% in a decrease in those days on market.
I was in those stats that, as we were going through them, what jumped out to me is the townhouse market in Ottawa being up, sales being up 7.8%, which was interesting to me, of that price point being up that much, being the largest gain, the others being kind of, single family being up 1%, condos being down 1.7, but townhomes being up almost 8% was kind of an interesting one. And I think that speaks to people being more mindful of their budget, of not wanting to overextend themselves, things like that. But I found that really jump out as far as being really kind of a hot commodity.
Well, I think it comes down
product.
to price point too. Like ultimately where the prices are now, like if you're looking at potentially a starter home, or even just like more, like if you're looking to have more affordability, like even, saying like a $500,000 townhome or $450,000 townhome, that was a 4-bedroom single family home 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Like from a budgeting standpoint, like that is still kind of a very reasonable price point to be shopping in. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday who has a condo downtown on Somerset, is up for renewal. And he was saying like he's seen the prices just in his building escalate over the last year. And I have to assume that's because people are back to work, people are looking downtown, but that is kind of offset by the job cuts. So it's kind of like this weird ebb and flow right now where there are more people considering moving downtown, but also a lot of the government jobs that would be working downtown have been cut. So it's like this kind of balancing act right now where they're trying to see where the market is going to land. I also read an article this morning talking about like people don't necessarily mind going to the office to work. What they hate is basically the drive in, like the actual transit into the office, the actual commute. And that is actually creating a lot of kind of remote offices and kind of office spaces outside the city, like closer to people's homes and so on. So yeah, it's a weird space right now where we're kind of still coming out of that pandemic era, both for commercial spaces, but also for residential spaces, as you said, with the townhomes. And I think condos too. Like, I'm interested to see where that condo market goes downtown over the next, say, 12 to 24 months with kind of the back to work mandates, but also the job losses. Like, where is that going to land? Because, Shopify continues to grow. There's still a lot of tech companies in Ottawa that are, that are growing pretty aggressively, especially with kind of this advent of AI and so on. So I don't know. It's an interesting market. It's kind of, fingers on the pulse here, seeing where things go. But I think the downtown market is a very interesting and unique market where we see single family homes still going for, on average, probably over $1 million. And the condos are either selling really quickly or sitting. So I don't know. I'm just interested to see, especially with we know the Sens are moving downtown. Probably it's going to be built in the next, say, 5 years, maybe longer. We'll see. We're on track. But that's obviously going to impact people wanting to be kind of in that. It's going to create another core like Lansdowne did. And what does that do for the condo market downtown? How does that boost those sales, resales, et cetera, in that market?
Yeah. I mean, in that condo, like you mentioned, the 12 to 24 month time frame, there's not going to be much new product, new build for sale product coming on the market anytime soon. Most of the buildings being built right now are all rentals downtown, which obviously eats up that availability for resale from the builders. So in that 12 to 24 months, as people come back to the office more, or maybe the downtown becomes more lively. I know there's, the city hall for municipal that there's been some back and forth with councillors and with city manager and constituents of whether they are mandating them to go back to work. At first it was yes, then it went to a vote, and then it's no, and then it's, it's up to the manager. And I think there's still, once that's figured out, federal government, there's, budget has been moved now to November 4th instead of, for fall budget coming out instead of spring. So budget still hasn't been tabled, whether, what that looks like, from a consolidating position. So I think there's, to your point, there's a lot of stuff still on the sidelines as far as, mandates back to work, job cuts or stay, and what that looks like, and the further development. But I will say, so for the condo market, it will be interesting to see what that holds. The single family home market downtown is still very vibrant. It is like when I see places go up for sale around me, they're gone within a week. They're literally going the day they're listed, and it's really an interesting market in that respect. Whereas like out in the suburbs, so it is still very high in demand downtown for single families, condos a little less so, and then further that where we're seeing that kind of stagnant properties is in the in a lot of the suburbs. I think that average days on market is kind of, again, we've always talked about it. Certain areas go really quick, other areas are more stagnant. So we'll kind of just keep an eye on how that trends.
Yeah, I've had a pair of clients that have been looking in the kind of Glebe, kind of in that area near Lansdowne for the better part of a year and a half. 4 different properties they've been super aggressive on and lost on all of them. As soon as it comes up in that neighborhood, they're all over it and they're gone within like a week, so they do their inspection, they do due diligence, and then it's sold. It's like they don't even have time to do what they need to do.
Are you trying to grow your mortgage business? CENTUM has the tools and support to help you take your business to the next level. Get access to everything from free unlimited custom marketing to daily direct pay. Find out what your business can do with CENTUM. Learn more at joincentum.ca. Are you thinking of buying or selling a residential property? Relationships are at the heart of every real estate transaction at Guertin, Poirier, Avocates Lawyers. We love to bring residential buyers, sellers, agents, lenders, mortgage brokers, and the law together to close the deal for you for an effortless client experience that opens doors. Call us at 613-744-4488 or visit our website at guertinpoirierlaw.ca. Let's get to the heart of your deal. Your home is one of your biggest investments, and the team at Big Westboro can help you protect it. Our expert brokers will find the perfect coverage to keep your home and belongings safe. Call 613-239-5792 or visit thebig.ca/Westboro for a free quote. Think big, protect what matters most. This episode is brought to you by Easy Neon Signs. Visit easyneonsigns.ca and use the promo code TOREP, TOREP, to get 20% off each and every order. easyneonsigns.ca, Canada's finest custom neon sign maker.
Just want to touch quickly on last week's show, David. So we had a comment on YouTube by, I'm not sure if it's just Shane B or just Sheneb. So it's one of the two. But it said, and I'll let you defend yourself here. It says, David, you're embarrassing yourself. It's not $15 billion. This is in regards to the Build Canada homes. It's not $15 billion to build 4,000 homes and or to set off the bureaucracy. For instance, Veterans Affairs Canada has nearly 4,000 employees and 200,000 veterans they look after on a $6.8 billion budget. The Canadian Forces budget is $26 billion, and they buy, repair aircraft, helicopters, ships, tanks, various vehicles, weapon systems, and pay the wages of soldiers and civilian staff. And lastly, the RCMP budget is just over $5 billion. So Build Canada Homes isn't going to employ 300,000 people and have an operating cost of $15 billion. Do better. I don't really understand the end. I think they kind of got caught in their words there, but I know we talked about this off air, but like maybe you just want to, I know this is the third episode you've had to do this, but maybe you just want to clarify again, like where everything stands as far as the Build Canada Homes in the budget.
Yeah, I mean, to start, Shane B is embarrassing himself by quoting the wrong figures. It's 13 billion and not 15, and to set up, not set off the bureaucracy. But I'll stop nitpicking on that first and foremost. But really in the Prime Minister's own press release from his own website and the federal government's website, it is $13 billion that has been set aside to set up this department, Build Canada Homes. They have allocated a new CEO for it. And with that $13 billion, the initial goal is for building 4,000 homes. So yes, their budget is $13 billion for setting up the bureaucracy and the department and for this 4,000 homes to be built. Now, the embarrassing part of it is that, as you pointed out, it is a $26 billion budget for the military, and they're allocating 50% of that equivalent budget for this department. And their goal is only to build 4,000 homes, and that they are not even the ones building them. They are relying on the public sector, or the private sector rather, to build them. So this is funding that is being set up for setting up this department, setting the employees in place, and then lending money through a pool of funds to the private sector to then build these homes. So it's not even that the government with this $13 billion is actually building it themselves. They are then passing this along. That is the 4,000 initial goal to build on. And they've identified 6 public sites that could be used for this. They have other sites that they've identified for that could build an additional 45,000. However, this $13 billion budget is for setting up the department, the bureaucracy, and to fund these initial 4,000 homes, which from simple basic math is $3.25 million per unit that their initial goal is between setting it up and funding the private sector to build this, which is pathetic. So Shane B, perhaps you did not listen to the previous episodes. Perhaps you did not read the press release yourself or listen to any of the press conferences on it. But what is embarrassing is the amount of money that is going to this and how inefficient it is. So I do agree with you that all of these other departments, like RCMP, a budget of just over $5 billion, the fact that the military has a budget of $26 billion, I completely agree with you. They are low in comparison to how much is being allocated for this. Mm-hmm. What is to be seen is number one is if it's set up properly and if it even actually gets legs under it, but what that budget is on an ongoing basis. But this $13 billion doesn't even take into account the additional $1.5 billion they allocated for transitional housing, another $1 billion for affordable housing, which then we're now over $15.5 billion for housing that is now we're creeping into over 50% of the military's budget for, as he stated, for buying, repairing, building aircrafts, ships, tanks, etc. Mm-hmm. So I agree that it is terrible that this is what they've allocated to this department and how inefficient it is. But really, it is the numbers that I stated in the previous episode are exactly what are in the numbers being released by our federal government right now. There's nothing that's been misconstrued on that.
Perfect, David. I thank you. I think it's clear as mud now. Everyone will fully understand. I know we're going to, no matter what, we're going to get kickback on the numbers because I think some people really agree with the budget that's been allocated. And I think to your point, the most shocking thing here is the amount being allocated for how much is being built, meaning that a large majority of that is going towards the actual setup of the program, the bureaucracy, that side of it, which is absurd. I think there's so many billions being thrown around these days and even trillions. You look at Nvidia, the company, they now have almost a $5 trillion market cap. When you talk about these sorts of numbers, we can't fathom the actual amount of money that is. Most people, if you make $1 million in your lifetime or have $1 million saved, it's like that was a big deal. You know what I mean? When you're talking $15 billion, like tax dollars, our own money that Canadians typically pay anywhere from 20 to 50% of our income in tax. $13 billion is an obscene amount of money, especially like you said, our actual Canadian Forces budget is only double that. So this is a lot of money going towards this. And if there's only resulting in 4,000 homes, at the end of the day, no matter how you cut it, no matter how many jobs are being employed, if it only creates 4,000 homes and this is to solve a housing crisis, that's a problem. You know what I mean? At least I think so. I think we both agree on that.
Even if they doubled their initial target of 4,000 and created 8,000 homes, it's costing over $1.5 million per home to build, between bureaucracy and funding it. And we're also talking about prefabricated modular homes, which are like 300 and 400 square feet and are less costly to build. So, that just means that there is that much more of this that is going to the bureaucracy side of setup and oversight than it is to actually building these homes. So really at the end of the day is, there needs to be better management of funds and less red tape or oversight. It's kind of wild. You obviously need oversight, especially when you're talking about public funded projects and the federal and the government, whether it doesn't matter what level of government, there needs to be oversight, absolutely, but to what cost?
So the last thing we wanted to touch on here, Dave, which is kind of killing the head or taking over the headlines, at least in our space, is OSFI is changing the rules on income producing residential real estate. So here's what they're doing. So Canada's bank regulator has clarified the rules for mortgages on rental or investment properties, so places that make money through rent. They're not creating new rules, but they're tightening how existing ones are applied, so banks can't be too loose with how they count a borrower's income. So main changes, if you already use some of your income, like your job salary, rent from another property, et cetera, to qualify for one mortgage, you can't reuse that same income to qualify for another rental mortgage property. So in other words, if that income is already spoken for, in quotes, in one loan, you can't count it again for a new one. So this prevents people from stretching their finances across multiple mortgages based on overlapping income. So a mortgage will now be treated as income producing if more than half of your ability to make payments comes from the property's own rent or cash flow. So why does this matter? These loans are considered riskier from the bank's perspective. Banks must set aside more capital, so money in reserve to cover those. And this could make rental or investment property mortgages harder to get or slightly more expensive. This is set to apply in early 2026, so it gives lenders some time to adjust their systems and policies. This will most likely affect most real estate investors or landlords who own multiple properties, so when they come up for renewal and things like that. People trying to qualify for more than one mortgage using that overlapping income, and banks and lenders who will have stricter and possibly higher interest rates on rental loans. So I know you have a lot of investment clients. I know you've been fielding a lot of questions about this. So what's your understanding of these rule changes, and what questions have you been asked, I guess, in the last week since this came out?
Yeah, from clients and agents, people have been very confused by it. And this tends to happen of things thrown out at, what happened is, this was thrown out at an industry day that OSFI just kind of, threw this out there without any sort of, real outline, without any real notification to mortgage agents and institutions. And so it kind of ends up being people scrambling to find answers. It's happened on a multitude of different announcements as of late in the last, couple of years, that some policy changes are just thrown off the cuff. And I don't know why they're not circulated ahead of time, or why they're not thoughtfully relayed on to the industry prior to just a public kind of off the cuff comment, because it doesn't allow for proper education of the market. And so, that's what happened in this sense with it. Even to your comments just now, like we see of all the rule changes, right now, rental properties are already premiumed by anywhere from 20 to 35 to 50 basis points on their, over and above a primary residence. Any sort of tightening of regulations or changes where there's additional capital required by an institution to keep on hand because of one change or another, it costs some money to hold additional capital, which then they have to pass that cost along to borrowers. So in this case, it's going to become more costly for institutions to mortgage rental properties. Well, they're going to pass it along to the borrower, and in turn, they're going to pass it along to the tenants. It's making it harder. And I'll get into some more explanation details. But by and large, when regulators make it, I understand their objective. Really what they're doing is they're seeing what's going on in the Vancouver and Toronto markets right now, of a lot of inventory on the market of condos. People, there's places not selling. They're worried about, defaults. There is, an increase in default rates slightly right now. So they're wanting to kind of squash that, if you will, of making it harder for investors to qualify. Now, this is targeting mom and pop real estate investors, which typically they have 1, 2, 3 in their portfolio. Limiting or making it harder or impossible for the mom and pop investors takes typically a lot of the rental supply out of the market that is geared towards family.
Yeah.
Mom and pop investors are buying townhomes, they're buying single family homes for the majority across Canada. In Toronto, in Vancouver, yes, it's more condos because that's what the market is predominantly. But in other markets around, whether that be other areas of BC, other areas of, the prairies, East Coast, Ontario, it's the mom and pop investors are buying up single family and townhomes to provide that as rental product for the low middle classes where, they need 3+ bedrooms. And so with making it harder for these investors to qualify, there's going to be a ripple effect as these tighten up and make it harder for qualifying on these, that you're going to be removing that mom and pop single family home investment or rental property, where now a family that has a family of 4, of 5, there's not going to be as much options on the table for them. And so again, you remove supply and you've got demand there. It's going to raise the rental rates. If you've got, it more costly for the bank to hold those mortgages, they're going to increase rates on that product, which is by in turn going to raise rents and make it harder. It's not going to affect institutional buyers. So this isn't going to affect REITs. It's not going to affect the, BlackRocks and Brookfields of the world coming in and buying up a ton of property and product, which then, as you get more institutional investors coming in, that's when you also have less control of the market. You've also raises, you have the possibility of rents increasing that much more because they control the predominant portion of a market or a neighborhood. And again, they're buying up condos and they're not buying up single family homes. If they go the other way, like in the States where the BlackRocks are buying up entire neighborhoods of property of single family homes, which we do see in the US, they control that market for those single family homes. And if that's the only product out there, they're controlling that market. They can charge whatever they want. That's my fear for any sort of, rule changes or tightening. In this case, they're making some kind of clarification. So I'll kind of go through a summary of this. So OSFI, as I said, they threw this out at an industry day. And what they're looking at is for borrowers with multiple mortgages, the income used for the borrower income criteria should not include income used to validate the borrower's ability to service mortgages on other properties. Kind of in follow-up, obviously a lot of questions came up. Does this mean that none of the borrower's income whatsoever can be used to qualify for a subsequent mortgage on an income-producing property, aka non-owner occupied rental, if that borrower already has a primary residence mortgage? So this was put out by Robert McClister, and he reached out to OSFI to get clarification. And so the question that was posed of OSFI was, if a borrower has a bank mortgage on their primary residence and they earn, obviously this is just round numbers and crazy numbers, but bear with me, has a bank mortgage on their primary residence, earns $1 million a year in personal income, and applies for a mortgage on a separate new rental property, does this mean that none of the $1 million of income can be used to qualify for a new rental mortgage, even though he may only need $100,000 of income to service his primary residence mortgage? OSFI's reply was, no, this is not the case. Since only $100,000 is needed to service the mortgage on the new primary residence, the remaining $900,000 can be used to determine if the new mortgage on the rental property should be classified as materially dependent on cash flows generated by the property. So they're saying there are no underwriting implications of this guidance. It's solely for the purpose of determining whether a new mortgage needs to be classified as materially dependent on cash flows generated by the property. Meaning, for the next property, is it just solely dependent on that cash flow? Is it like for professional investors? This is going to impact them more, where like all of their income is coming from rental properties and using income from rental property one for qualifying for the next. And it's making up more than 50% of their income. So whether the borrower's primary residence mortgages with a non-federally regulated lender makes no difference. Long story short, OSFI wants to know if the income producing residential real estate exposure for all lenders it regulates, a loan will be deemed income producing if 50% or more of the income used to qualify comes from the property itself. Specifically, a property that is classified as materially dependent on cash flows generated by the property for capital purposes means that the mortgage relies heavily on money generated by the property itself, such as rental income. The ramifications are that the lender needs to hold more capital to protect against potential losses. So this is where I was mentioning about rule changes where, it can lead to the bank having to hold more reserve funds in their coffers. So if this is the case, and this is what OSFI is outlining, that they need to hold more capital to protect against potential losses, not actual losses, that they now need to hold this, they can't lend that money out. This directly reflects then in the mortgage rates that they're going to be charging on rental properties. And there's going to be likely a classification of potentially those different rates. We haven't seen what this looks like. Lenders haven't commented on it yet. So we're going to see what that looks like and how that's going to impact things. But one banker did comment to Robert McClister that if this guidance resulted in much more than a 5 basis point impact on a big 6 bank's rental pricing, he'd be surprised, but regulation nonetheless has a price. In the event of a 5 basis point rental pricing bump, and this is a back of the envelope hypothetical, not a prediction, but rental investors who rely mainly on rental income for debt servicing $50,000 loan could be on the hook for over $1,500 in extra interest over 5 years. So it's not huge. So what he's asking is folks should, ask themselves, what tangible benefit do Canadians get in return for that extra cost? At some point, layering on defenses against hypothetical risk starts to look like wrapping bubble wrap around a tank, especially when Canada's mortgage system has already proven its resiliency through numerous nasty storms. So the regulator wraps up by noting that even if a mortgage is considered riskier for capital purposes, the bank still follows B20 guidelines for reviewing and approving the loan. Accordingly, lenders should also exercise rigorous due diligence in underwriting those loans that are materially dependent on income derived from the property to repay the loan. So the new capital adequacy requirements officially kicks in on November 1st for Canada's big 6 banks. Now, the interesting thing of all this is that it impacts federally regulated banks. It does not impact credit unions, and it does not impact the alternative market space. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot of this is, and a lot of people listening are still like, what the heck are you talking about? Just the same as sometimes that, we talk to each other about it, just being like, what the heck does this actually mean? What does it all mean, Basil?
Exactly.
But as lenders start to digest this, as they obviously start to understand what this capital requirement is going to be, we'll start to get more details from them, how they're going to price things, how they're going to treat it, how it's going to impact underwriting guidelines. What I will say is that a lot of the, from all indications, is that a lot of the guidelines for rental calculations will kick in for January 1st. But again, what exactly the that looks like from an underwriting processing standpoint. Because right now, when we're calculating the income on a rental, if they have a lease or a tenant at $2,000 a month, we're only able to, in a lot of cases for most banks, only able to use 50% of that anyways. So we're only able to use $1,000 for qualifying purposes for then factoring in what the mortgage payment is. So 100% of the mortgage payment, property taxes, utilities, then it comes off that, but it's based on that 50%. So there's already, in the market that we're in with, pricing where it's at, there's already a loss on that. And what comes up is that their income that they make from their day job is offsetting that, quote unquote loss on that rental, because we're only able to use 50% of that rental income to begin with. So I'm curious as to see how it really does impact things from a pure underwriting perspective and how that tightens things up. But I will say, I certainly looked at it where I was like, shoot, I have clients that that are buying or already have purchase agreements signed for 2026 that are rentals, some new product, some resales. And we based it on current underwriting guidelines where it's like, okay, we need a commitment now if you're within that 120 days to lock it in, so that it's locked in, broker complete, meaning all conditions satisfied, so nothing can be pulled. Because again, we don't know, how they're going to treat things as far as like when a purchase agreement was signed. And for others where it's like, okay, well, we actually need to, we can't say that we're going to have to go to the alternative space right now, because again, it's not fully clear as far as how the exact numbers will work out on an application for these individuals. But it very well could impact things and push those borrowers from qualifying with a big six bank or an A lender and getting best rates, if you will, for that rental product, pushing them into the alternative B lending space or into the private and mixed space. There's still going to be people wanting to invest. There'll still be ways of getting it done. That private space, that mixed space is probably just going to grow as a byproduct because they don't have to follow the same guidelines. Just like credit unions are provincially regulated, they do not need to follow the same guidelines. And as an example, like right now for qualifying on a mortgage, everyone knows, well, not everyone, but your rate, it's +2 that you're qualifying on. Credit unions, of the rate we need to use is if that's your mortgage rate. Credit unions don't have to use that. So there's some credit unions that can qualify based on your actual rate as it is. So it'll be interesting to see how the different lenders treat this and more information as it comes out. But we'll have more, I'm sure, next episode.
Welcome to the David Warren Real Estate Show. Oh, that was great. That was actually a very good summary. We'll clip that as a segment, basically. But yeah, I think over the coming weeks, this has been talked about back and forth. There was still a lot of confusion this week, I think, from professionals as well, as to exactly how it's going to impact things. So I think as it gets clearer and as they kind of define it further, we'll be sure to kind of keep everyone in the loop as to exactly what's happening and make sure you're in the know. This is your go-to source for Canadian real estate, right? So we got to make sure everyone's in the know. Dave, I have some boosts. Should we slide into them?
Yeah, I need to stop talking.
Get some water over there. Jesus. Okay, I got 3 today. Number 1, what did the triangle say to the circle? You're pointless. Pointless. Mm-hmm. Number 2, why did the archaeologist's wife divorce him? He was carbon dating. That son of a gun. Number 3, did you hear about the sensitive burglar? He takes things personally. I know Greg will like that one. Greg will send me a message being like, I like that one for sure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. New shows are released every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Be sure to follow us on our socials. And thank you to our amazing sponsors, Guertin, Poirier, Avocates Lawyers, Big Insurance in Westboro, CENTUM, and Easy Neon Signs, easyneonsigns.ca. Use the promo code TOREP. Get 20% off each and every order. And also, click the link in the description. You'll be entered into the draw to win your own neon sign, custom neon sign, which will be at the end of October. At the end of each month, we're going to give one away each month. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. David, thank you for your insights. Thank you for being here, as always. Go Jays.
Let's go, Blue Jays.
We'll see you next week, everyone.
Deuces.